Salutations from space and aloha from Earth. Good to see you here. I could just play this thing all day and try to communicate this astrology in a musical way. I'm going to share this around to a couple pages while we're waiting for some crew to show. And top of the morning to you, or evening or night, or wherever it is that you are in space and time, maybe in the future. Maybe somehow even having managed to already see this live thing in what I might consider the past. Who knows how this works? Well, that was the language of last night's dream world, as this Pisces moon had us in that space of faith and dream and poetry and song and communicating astrology musically. But those days are over, those 2.3 days, as it tends to be with the moon's dance through the signs of the wheel of life. And now she has found her way to the bright red spark of the flame that is called Aries. Let me show you Aries Smurf. Aries Smurf means business, as you can see. He's got his little sheepskin coat going on here. Looks like he wants to be holding a spear or maybe picking a fight. That's kind of why I like the Zodiac Smurfs. They're so absurdly stereotypical and ridiculous. Aries Smurf's pretty fit for a Smurf, though, you'll also notice. Right. So a little tea, and let's head to the charts. For one thing, having ingressed Aries, Moon is now aligning herself to Chiron. And this is the first of many monthly alignments of Moon and Chiron in the sign of Aries. Chiron entered Aries on April 17th, 2018, rather recently, and won't leave to head into Taurus until June 19th, 2026. Even after that time, he'll come back into the Aries Mystery School for a little unfinished business. But anyway, there's years and years of monthly embraces of Chiron by the moon's welcoming and loving light. And you know, it's a really wonderful thing when we have an opportunity in this way to ask Moon to bring us to the invisible ones. Do you see what I mean by that? I mean, Chiron, we can never see with our face, right? So Moon will come and shine her light in this place of space where the invisible ones reside, and bring us, along with this, the opportunity to ride her light out into that distance place and connect our prayers, if you will, our visions to the invisible. So Chiron means many things. You know, Chiron taught combat. Let's bring this fellow back in here. Taught martial arts. Maybe that's best suited in the Pisces school. Aries school. He also taught poetry and music, right? Orpheus is one of Chiron's great students. And he taught the arts and taught logic. Maybe you want to bring some of these air beings into the mix and talk about that for a bit. Where are you at, Papa Smurf? Chiron probably taught astrology, let's face it, and astronomy, and the quadrivium, number, logic, and rhetoric, and, he was the great teacher. And we love to speak about Chiron's wounds, don't we? His original wound of abandonment, born to a father who never intended to be around even for a second after the seed was planted. And that seed, by the way, was planted by a horse because Saturn had converted himself into this animal form to escape detection by his wife when having a romp on Earth with the beautiful nymph Philyra. So Dad was never going to stick around in the first place. Papa was a Rolling Stone with rings. And Mom didn't want the freak either because Chiron was super freaky. The first centaur ever born, formed from this marriage of horse and human. And some you may see, in the old drawings, they often draw that Chiron was a little bit less of a horse-based centaur than those that would follow, that Chiron actually had the human arms up here, and then the front two legs that we would consider the horse legs were human feet. So he was like full human with some horse on the back, you see. But either way, one of the most important and beautiful things about Chiron is he reminds us that we are animals. One of the most important things about Aries is the reminder that we are animals. And that the spark of passion should be a true way of guidance for us. And what is the passion of the earth, I ask, in this Moon Chiron conjunction? So let me show you a thing real quick. I'll show you where Moon is in the heavens right now. And you got to wake up pretty early to see Moon at this time, right? We'll go over to Stellarium here. This is right now. Moon's already culminated, and right now it looks a little bit more like this. Or I'd have to paint a bunch of gray clouds in to simulate true Seattle at Gemini house right now. But anyway, let's go back in time a little bit and show you just moonrise this morning and where the first degree of tropical Aries exists in our time. And Moon is very low right now, as you can see. She's well ahead of her south lunar node, which is in the sign of Aquarius, about right here, and heading down towards southern bending, which is in the sign of Taurus. She'll get even further from the ecliptic. She'll get even further south latitude, which is a tale for another time, but very interesting because understand as well that Moon here in Aries is bringing that Aries spark down to Earth. You see, we often talk about the fire like way up there, bringing that lineage of the Aries way down to Earth. I almost just said the warrior's way, but Aries is so much more than warrior alone. All right. So if you learn to connect to this ecliptic head of the fish, these are the fish's constellations. And in our day and age, the zero Aries point, where Chiron is hanging out right now, and Moon is just for a moment, lives very close to that head of the fish that rises and sets first. All right, so you might, in the Northern Hemisphere, connect first with Pegasus, Markab, Sheet. These are very bright stars because the fish's constellation is very not bright. You can also find, you see here the half of an Aquarius glyph. That's a bit of the water bearer, who in our day and age is aligned to the seasonal tropical sign of Pisces. But you can follow, once you find that little half of a Aries glyph in the sky, it points you over, and you can kind of triangulate with that top of the water bearer and the body, or the great square of Pegasus, and it will bring you down to this head of the fish, which becomes visible. I mean, it's this amazing pentagonal structure. And, you know, even in this way with the fish, like one of the fishes is reaching up for the heavens and one is coming down to earth. Although in the Southern Hemisphere, it's kind of a different description. And, you know what, I'll show this scene in, let's go to Melbourne, Australia as well. Where we're going to have to look to the northern sky because planets culminate over there in the Southern Hemisphere. And I seem to have lost my ecliptic. There it is. All right, so come up a couple hours. And here's the 0 Aries degree from the Southern Hemisphere's perspective. You see how the fish now is closer to the Earth? The constellations between the hemispheres are upside down in respect one to the other. Here, the Pegasus walks the land, and does so, by the way, the Southern Hemisphere right side up, the way most people draw Pegasus. Northern Hemisphere, the winged horse flies upside down, which is an interesting contemplation. But you'll notice that of the two fish in the Southern Hemisphere, one basically points down to the ground, and one there is kind of picking the ground up and taking it towards the heavenly course, because this golden circle here, the ecliptic plane, that's the plane of Earth about Sun. So from Earth's point of view, it's Sun through the constellations and the signs of the zodiac. So there's kind of outside of that and inside of that, heavenly and earthly, you know. And Moon by latitude is such an amazing teacher. And it's an amazing teacher, too, of one of the principal and most beautiful differences between Northern and Southern Hemisphere skies is that a Southern latitude moon in the Southern Hemisphere is on the heavenly side, right? So in the Southern Hemisphere, Aries, which is a bit of a lower sign, a fall sign, the moon is taking it up. And in the Northern Hemisphere, we'll go back to Seattle, the sign of Aries is a northern sign, spring, and the moon is bringing it down with the southern latitude. Sorry for the sounds out there. I guess that excites me to share some of what's going down right here in my home. Unfortunately, I'm going off to house sit for the weekend, but there's a dead rat in one of my heat ducts. And so I got home from a trip and turned on the heat, and it smelled of significant dead rat, which was, yes, a rather unfortunate thing. Sorry, I'm just trying to set this chart back up to how I had it before off the screen, because we're gonna look at the chart in a second. Yeah, and going down into the crawl space kind of warrior mode, you know? And it's not a pretty scene down there. And sadly, some rats have chewed through like one of the principal air ducts. And so if I use my heat, it smells like dead rat. And I've been like probably breathing some dead rat the last few days, and I'm sick, which is not really a surprise considering the beginning of that sentence. Actually didn't even think until this morning somehow that I should cover all of the vents and the intake. You know, the intake was the harder one to do, but that's now happened. And so now all the windows are open and we're airing this place out a little bit. But I've been heatless. And now we're in the Aries month. And it's kind of really interesting for me to contemplate, well, I'm disconnected from my heat. And maybe also disconnected from the animal nature. You know, it's an interesting thing. Like, do I want to go on like a rat killing spree? And the answer in general to that question is no, not at all. In fact, this is so much my bad because I had seen that some rats were making residence down in the crawl space and was kind of cool with it. But eating through the heat ducts and then stinking the house with dead rat smell. And then the scene down there is out of control. And I guess I should have taken control earlier. And I'm thinking about a lot of the Capricorn, Mars, and Saturn right now too. And like, what is my dominion? What is my domicile? And then how do I be like a good keeper of the house and stuff, So rats probably don't make great pets and probably don't make great cohabitants. And I don't know. I mean, I happen to be a rabbit, but the rat is a sign of the Chinese zodiac. And anyway, so it's going to take some days before the parts arrive to get this thing fixed. And it's not cheap, and that sucks. And it sucks to be sick and to not be able to turn on my heat when I am and all that, But all of that for me opens really wide windows of contemplation. What are these symbols about? What are these symbols in my outer world speaking to in relationship to me? Where is my own energetic? How am I a rat chewing through heat ducts? What is that symbol? I have no idea, by the way. I'm working on it. I've been playing a bunch of the Nutcracker songs, right? Thinking of like the Rat King, which has been interesting. A little Tchaikovsky. So what is it to lack heat? And I think one thing that it's opening for me is an opportunity to contemplate more of Aries Uranus in these final days before Aries ingresses Taurus, which is just next week, May 15th. And we did a webinar about that for Cosmic Intelligence Agency last night. You can find it on YouTube. I have another Uranian Revelations YouTube thing you can find I did for EA Zoom meetings. It's called Uranian Revelations. So I've been thinking about it a bunch, and the truth is we're still in an Aries-Uranus cycle, synod cycle, Sun-Uranus aligned on April 19th to make a synod for their year in a few days. I think it's 369 and change days is the Sun-Uranus cycle. And the next one in 2019 will be in Taurus. But even though this is an Aries cycle that we're playing in, Uranus does ingress Taurus on May 15th and will later retrograde in August, return to Aries for some unfinished business around November 6th, the same day the nodes regress from Leo, Aquarius to Cancer, Capricorn, the nodes of the moon. And Uranus will return to Taurus to stay for some time, about 7 years, come March 6th, 2019. So really contemplating, like, what does this Aries-Uranus time mean? Aries first welcomed Uranus in 2010, and then to stay for some time on March 11th, 2011, which is the very strange and tragic Fukushima reactor event. So I've been thinking a lot about things like power and free energy and nuclear fission and fusion, and looking into actually like uranium and neptunium and plutonium and like how these things are created, and how like we wouldn't receive images of Uranus and Neptune and Pluto if it wasn't for uranium and neptunium and plutonium, because we power those long distance spacecraft with plutonium, which is made from neptunium, which is made from uranium. And that's a fascinating thing. And we're running out, and you have to make weapons grade shit if you want to power a spacecraft, which is terrifying. And nuclear power plant, going down is terrifying. So it's interesting because I've been contemplating like way outside of me these ideas of energy, and then to come home and then have my own home's energy like not available to me. I still have hot water, But it's an interesting phenomena, you know, and it's a really beautiful thing about astrology. A very beautiful thing about astrology is that things can be happening in our own lives, you know, really heavy calcinations within, you know, significant like emotional turmoil or spiritual shatterings and awakenings, or things without, like a rat ate its way through my heat duct and now there's no heat, or else it smells like dead rats in my house, which is not good for my health and I'm sick and such. And then to say, oh, cool, I wonder how that shows up on an astrology chart, you know, maybe something to do with my IC, right? Which is below, or perhaps the ruler of the IC, you know, those kinds of ways where we can start to connect to, first of all, like what would the old techniques be for thinking about rats living in your underworld? And also, maybe that example wasn't written, and maybe I'm living that example to learn my craft. But more importantly, maybe I'm experiencing that example outside of me to understand that it's simply a reflection of something that's going on inside of me. And then I get to contemplate, what are my heat ducts, right? What is my furnace? What are my rats? What is it that they seem to be in competition? Or maybe I haven't been given my inner rats a warm enough place to sleep, and so they've had to come interfere with a system that's not meant to be their home, you know. And then the chart itself for me is a window to merge these two worlds, these worlds of the above and the below, the particular, the whole, without and within. And so I can start taking these symbols like rats in the heat ducts and apply them to my own personal growth. Well, that doesn't happen through astrology alone. That requires like deep contemplation and meditation, which is not my forte, and maybe also is not the forte of the Aries mysteries, which are about where am I going to give this energy to? But when I don't have the energy, then I can look into perhaps some of these Aries wounds. And that's going to bring me back to Chiron. I personally have Chiron in Aries. Many of you do. Chiron is furthest from the sun in the sign of Aries. His aphelion is in that sign. You know, I say that without exactly knowing, but it must be true because I know for sure that Chiron spends more time in the sign of Aries than anywhere else, and that's how that would work. Chiron has a very strange elliptical orbit. No orbits are circles, they are all ellipses. And where the ellipse is most distant from that which the planet is rotating, aka the sun or their Bay center, that the furthest point is where the planet is slowest in its course, furthest, coldest, yeah. And for Chiron, this is Aries, which is a wonderful contemplation of Aries in general, right? Like that this sign that we think of as so hot and dry and fiery is a place where for Chiron, he is most cold, distant, you see, slow. Aries doesn't dig slow, right? So does Aries actually get to explore some of its own potential wounding in the beauty of Chiron's, not only Chiron who speaks to this nature of our nature in general, but who in the sign of Aries is maybe doing things that Aries likes least. A lot of this is just because, like, if you watch the sun day after day at equinox time, and this is true for either Aries or Libra, you will see that it's sprinting on the horizon from March equinox in both hemispheres. The sun will rise further north of east every day after that until June solstice. And at the time between really like in the kind of Pisces Aries zone, it's like flying super fast. Now in the northern hemisphere, the sign of Aries also sprints past the ascendant. In Seattle, where I live, the sign of Aries rises in 1 hour and 7 seconds. Now dig that, okay? We say that, oh yeah, all the signs rise for about 2 hours, right? Because 24 hours a day, 12 signs a day, 24 divided by 12 equals 2, right? Yeah, and wrong, because signs of short and long ascension, which is a wonderful thing to dig into. We're not going to do so much of it today. I'll tell you the secret ingredient is the altitude of the midheaven if you want to explore that astronomically. But some signs rise quickly and some signs rise slowly. Aries rise very quickly in the northern hemisphere. You're much less likely to have Aries rising beings than you are to have Virgo or Libra rising beings, the signs of northern hemisphere long ascension for northern hemisphere born natives. Now, 88% of the human population resides in the northern hemisphere, okay? So just say that before saying in the southern hemisphere, it's opposite. Libra has the fast, Virgo and Libra have the fast climb. And for Pisces and Aries, the slowest climb. All right. In Seattle, it's like 2 hours and 45 minutes for Virgo and Libra to rise. Interestingly, also for Leo and Scorpio, that's a mystery I've not yet decoded. So something for another time if I can ever figure it out. But 2 hours, 45 minutes, 2 hours, 43 minutes for Virgo and Libra to ascend in Seattle, where I live. And 1 hour and 7 seconds for Pisces and Aries to ascend. So they're very fast. Yeah, not something we typically associate with the Pisces mysteries, but that's a fun place to go too, you know. But for Aries, this is what we think of. And so in some senses, if we're just monitoring the sun's rising and setting on the eastern and western horizons, regardless of hemisphere, Aries is super fast. All of the equinox signs are super fast. If we want to go with signs of short and long ascension, northern hemisphere also brings an amazing quickness to the Aries mysteries too. Now, I could have said all that in one phrase, which is Aries likes fast. But you know what I'm after is in nature, the proofs of the equations, the roots of the rules that we use. And so the more that I find them, the more that I will share them. This is more and more what I'm called to share and teach and bring back to astrology is the sacred astronomy side of it, as you know. And plug time, I'll be teaching live for Organization for Professional Astrology in the desert in Tucson. They're like a beautiful boutique hotel, October 8th, 9th, 10th, 2018. Come on down, like 7 hours in the classroom a day. But we're going to have fun. We won't only be in the classroom, we'll be outside moving around, building sundials, doing shadow play. And then at night, under the big screen, we'll see every visible planet. We're really going to learn to see the chart in space with our face. And I hope you'll consider coming. I'll put a link, I guess, up here in the description since I shared this around to OPA's website. You can also just search Organization for Professional Astrology. And the event is I-Astrologer, which has a first part, October 5th, 6th, 7th, which is about how astrologers can take their thing pro. So people who are already established in business, like clean it up, you know, make better websites. I need to attend that and learn how to like produce videos and things that really help for marketing in our day and age. And everybody gets like a pro photo and, you know, important things and talking about public presentation, etc. And then the second half, there's 2 tracks. One is like pure counseling, which is part of OPA's certification process. And the other is astronomy for astrologers with me. And for them, love to know that astronomy for astrologers is now part of OPA's certification process, which I think is genius and so beautiful. And I believe that this is actually a signature and a premonition of what's going to happen in our astrological craft with Uranus's dance through the sign of Taurus, because Uranus, heavens, Taurus, earth. And so in this marriage of heaven and earth, Uranus, who we very much associate with astrology, you know, bringing astrology back down to earthly ways. And that's sweet, you know, because that's what I'm all about. So may that be so. All right. I guess so. Let's get to these charts. Well, no, a little bit more about the wounds first. I wish I had a Chiron. Well, you know what? I have a centaur, don't I? Sagittarius and Sagittarius Smurf. You know, these guys together as constellations anyway point to the center of the galaxy. And you know, this Sagittarius being was originally just the archer. Let's give him feet. Let's see if we can sneak some feet onto that dude. And Chiron was initially positioned as Taurus constellation, which has since, and this was a long time ago, since through precession of the equinoxes, fallen from the northern hemisphere skies, fallen from Greek eyes. And as that happened, Chiron was repositioned to Sagittarius constellation. And so that's when Sagittarius, that's when the archer grew hooves. You see, I mean, because Chiron was so worshipped and respected and revered. I mean, I'm told there was a time in northern Africa where there were more temples for Chiron than for his half brother Zeus, this great healer, this great mentor. There's another thing I'll put up in the descriptions above. It's also an OPA thing. I wrote an article for them in their December solstice edition of the Career Astrologer magazine. Speaking about the elemental shifts of this year, like Saturn fire into Capricorn, Saturn earth, you know, Aries to Taurus for Uranus, Pisces to Aries for Chiron. Those are very significant elemental changes. And the thing that Mercury's doing to kind of complement this, but from the other side to balance this, and that his greater cycles are moving from earth to fire. And so I'll put a link to that. You can read it if you'd like. I really was trying to write about Mercury in the elemental year, something that I first connected to through the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School, and then furthered in my studies with Gary Caton, who's written a brilliant book, by the way. The first of 3 Mercury books from Gary, which is the Hermetica Triptycha, about the Mercury elemental years. And I was trying to write an article about that, and kind of wrote to Gary. I was like, hey man, I don't want to like bite your style, but I want to share about this from a different perspective. And then I was trying to write this thing forever, and it just wasn't happening. I was at my sister's place down in California, and I was sitting there just staring at, you know, a half-written sentence. That was like an Aries wound. You know what I'm saying? When you can't start a thing, like when the spark just isn't even available. And I'm just battling with that. And this golden eagle came in and flew and landed in this tree. Actually, it wasn't a golden eagle. It wasn't my mentality, but it was actually a red-shouldered hawk. But a big, beautiful bird, and it landed in the top of this tree right in front of me. And as I say that, a very small bird, a robin, just flew like almost into my screen door. Interesting. And I wouldn't usually see that, but fortunately rats have eaten through my heat ducts, so the door's open. That was cool. We almost had bird company, by the way. Yeah, so I saw that, and I instantly just thought about Prometheus. Prometheus, who, I mean, maybe it was Rick Tarnas first, but many astrologers have associated mythically with the planet Uranus, that feeling in that rebellious way, and that kind of technological agent, Prometheus, who stole fire from the gods to bring to his creation, who was humankind, right? It wasn't the first time we had been created, but Prometheus and his brother Epimetheus were sent to recreate us after we were wiped from the face. And the next time that happened, it was Prometheus's son and his wife Pyrrha. His son Deucalion, and Pyrrha, which is also fire, you know, survived, and were trained by Themis how to connect to the earth to reseed our planet with humanity. And by the way, that was them throwing the bones of their grandmothers, grandparents over their shoulders. This riddle, which was actually that Gaia, Earth, is grandmother, and her stones are bones. And so Pyrrha threw these stones over her shoulder. They became women, and Deucalion over his, and they became man. And that's like in the Greek cosmology, at least from that branch of the world tree, who we are. Like after the deluge, after the flood, we survived because these two who were maybe the only reverent beings left on earth, incredibly so, as it was Deucalion's father. And in a sense, Pyrrha's father, her father was, well, actually, you know what? I should stop myself. I'm not sure. Anyway, who did this incredibly rebellious, maybe irreverent, and maybe very wise thing to bring fire down to earth. And let's just say that gift of Prometheus is a gift that, you know, he who also molded us in the shapes of the guides and guidesses themselves and gave us fire, I think, to remind us that we are creator. So Prometheus, you probably know, was punished severely for this. And there was at the extreme time of his punishment, which lasted for centuries, there was a red eagle that would peck his liver from his body by day, painfully so, and it would regenerate by night. And one of the conditions for his release from this torture was that an immortal must choose to take his place. Now, when Chiron wounded himself by dropping this poison arrow from Hercules' bow that was misguided in a battle of human and centaur that Chiron was just witnessing, for he was centaur, but it was his students, the humans. He caught this bow that was tipped with a poison that he himself had taught Hercules to fashion from the blood of the Hydra. And it mingled because he dropped this arrow after he caught it. He serendipitously dropped it and it pierced his shin. And this blood mingled with his own. And he was half immortal, the son of Saturn, you know, which fascinatingly is his horse half, if you think about it, right? So the immortal part could not die, but the mortal part could feel pain. The mortal part in this case was actually the, you know, if you think of like Chiron, like it was kind of the consciousness or the heavenly side. There's a statement here that it's our earthly ways that are immortal. You know, we are, our bones are her stones. And that lives forever. Where it's the other side that has immortality. Now, I love that to balance the idea and the very potential truth that our bodies will die and decay, where it is the other stuff that does not and is immortal. And it's a fun, I'm always looking for these kind of, you know, playful ways to do both sides at once and attempt to meet in the middle where the twins embrace, you know. All right, so we love to speak about Chiron's wounds. One, he was abandoned by his mother for being this freak, you know. And in that pain of abandonment, which is one of the principal pains, I mean, not only in most of our lives, you know, some of us very presently, a father who split, a mother who split, parents that died. Some of us much less actively in the energetic, but the energetic exists. I mean, even the first time that baby cries for food in the middle of the night, and mother, I mean, bless the mothers of this world who give so much to bring life. But the first time mother says, oh, I used to sleep before you, you know what I mean? It just even energetically, like that pain of, wow, I'm a burden. But I think more importantly, the pain of abandonment in that, and this is the true story of this cusp we call the ascendant, where the heavens rise because the earth descends. We descend into matter to receive the pneumos in the spirit, right? And it looks like this. And that place where on the seventh house side, we speak about relationship. Well, on the seventh house side, the heavens, you know, merge into the horizon as the horizon actually is rising towards the heavens, right? The west sets because the earth is rising in that direction. And it's something we can see. We can watch the sunset. As far as the sunrise, where in the heavens did it come from? Or where in the hell did it come from, you see? It's a much more mysterious thing. It's very much equally the same essence of relationship, but it's a relationship to something we cannot see. It's a relationship to spirit. And that whole in not knowing, it seems to me that one of the great gifts of a human incarnation is that it is married to the art of forgetting. And there's a wound there, there's a pain there. You know, we go through culture and, you know, one extreme side says, this is what God is. This is how you pray. This is faith. This is your Lord and Savior, right? Trying to fill that hole before we're even conscious that it's there. And if we fill it that way, we might never become conscious that it exists. We also might not if we listen to this side, which is that God is dead. In fact, he never lived, because that's a bunch of bullshit. Science, you know, rationalist. And these are two principal avenues of our current cultural crazy that keep us committed to forgetting that we are a reflection of the all. And so that division between spirit and soul, as I like to think of spirit, the one thing, and soul, the reflection of the one into a more individual experience, that forgetting is such a principal essence, tension, abandonment, wound, pain that births the spark that brings the wisdom of a soul who chooses to look around and say, whoa, there's more going on here than I can see. There's more going on here than I was told. And there's a ton of Aries impetus there. So, you know, when I say, oh, warrior school, that just doesn't do. Let's talk about this place. And you know, it's criminal and accurate to relate the houses and the signs. They are not one-to-one things, but there's a lot of 12thness in the Pisces mysteries and a lot of firstness in that which we call Aries, isn't there? All right, so come on, fish, let's get together, you know. And I'm going to do this to align them appropriately to the cardinal directions where I am right now. The dream, the poem, the song, the highest vision, the return to source. I am part of the essence. And then I wake up. And before my body wakes up and I'm called to rise out of bed to get something to eat, or perhaps to exercise, or perhaps make love to that beautiful being who's laying at my side, or whatever, you know, before that body comes in, which to me is symbolized to the birth time by the cutting of the cord, there's this time where I can live in both of these spaces, where I can be inspired by what's ahead of me for today, but still connected to the dream place. And the most amazing time that happens, you might have experienced this, and it's a strange and very painful thing to the Aries mysteries, is waking, being consciously awake, and also having body paralysis, because you're also still stuck in the dream state. In those places, before sleep and after awakening, but in the in-between worlds, you know, the like the dusk and the dawn, where the dreamer and the awakening one are connected. This to me, it's reconnected and emphasized every time Moon finds her way across the Pisces-Aries divide. Because what happens with the warrior and the awakening one so frequently is that we've received some vision. You know, it's different for each of us, but it's a very isolating thing, because suddenly you're different than your old friends. You can't talk about sports and jobs anymore, you know? And for some of us, it's conspiracy theory. For some of us, it's suddenly like, you know, the crystal ball had a vision, whatever, right? But it's isolating and strange. And then many of us are then inspired to go shake the world awake. And that's not a healthy way. I mean, I cannot tell you how many times, well, I can, maybe 3 or 4, that I've brought my own mother to tears trying to awaken her to 9/11 truth. It's being a bad son. It really is, you know? A better route is, hey, Mom, happy Mother's Day weekend. I love you. You know? Ever notice that Mother's Day weekend happens with Sun in Taurus? Okay. And this one actually will go down with the moon there too. I keep promising we'll look at charts. I meant for this thing to be a short go today, but somehow like my own wounds that are wishing for wisdom are challenging me to share some things so I can tune into the rats in my interior heat ducts, if you will, before I'm in meditation tonight, which is the plan this weekend, to disconnect a little bit. And see, that's a really fun thing, because usually I would do that more on like a Pisces moon, you know, especially Pisces moon with Neptune, as it's been for a long time. Pisces moon with Chiron, which has been for a long time, for years now. And now it's Aries moons with Chiron. It's Pisces moons with Neptune every month. And a couple days later, Aries moon with Chiron every month for some time. And then Aries moon with Uranus, excuse me, as it's been for a long time. And coming soon to a theater called You, Aries moon with Taurus Uranus. Sorry, that would be a Taurus moon with Uranus every month for some time. In fact, this will be the first Aries moon Chiron conjunction for many of us in our lifetimes, and the last Aries moon Uranus conjunction for a long time, and at least until next year. So that is something to consider. Okay. Do we go charts, or do we speak a little bit more? We speak just a little bit more. Sorry, sometimes the inner narrator also expresses out loud. This is one of my favorite guides. And here's the rabbit and the crow Tengu, but I want to speak about deer. And about centaur. So that wound of the intentional and very important separation of soul and spirit. And when they start coming back in, which typically happens through an alchemical nigredo, blackening, you know, a calcification, like a burning, a calcination, disillusion, you know, being lost in our insanity before separation, which is me and which is not. And a lot of that is a very isolating event before the conjunction, where we can choose who we are and come back together and find the lesser stone and do some work from there. And I don't want to go too far on that course. But I'll say one of the things that often happens is in this so-called awakening, which I prefer to call the aweirdening, there's this idea that we should be shaking other people awake. And, you know, for me too, there was this thing about, wow, what if I just listened to that girl that I called a crystal-toting hippie, the first one who gave me a Pleiadian book? What if I just read it instead of like ridiculing her? What if I knew then, as I do now, that sometimes the things we most ridicule are exactly those which we are destined to become but are resisting? So I'm destined to become a Kardashian, I guess. Anyway, what if I did that? Where would I be now? You know? And what I realized in this night, and it wasn't in a very moment that the moon was changing from Pisces to Aries, and I was in a deep contemplative meditation. And I was experiencing this idea of like, wow, I'm trying to shake people awake so we can solve this pain in this terrible world. And I'm only making things worse. Suddenly I realized that. I felt it before, but I never realized I'm spreading these words that actually I'm serving the very thing I'm trying to awaken people to. I am the one that am serving the spread of this fear and this pain. And you know what? It's stupid to shake somebody awake. Alarm clocks suck. If we're coming out of the dream and coming into the awakening spark through beep, 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 you know what I'm saying? Like, how is the dream doing? Is it gone? You know? And that's the same thing. Wake up, our world is going down, you know, like we will never see the dream. And so the true role of the spark, of the fire, the science of the fire, this is Aries, the pioneering scout, and the warrior, the true defender of the mysteries and of the essence of awakening and what is worth fighting for, that is one thing, you know, but it happens without fighting. And that's the strangest thing. And that's where, you know, without the gift of these polarities, like, where's my Aries fellow? Like this, without the gift of Libra, Aries, libraries, which help us find the middle way is Earth, you know. We don't understand that the way to win the war is through peace. And the way to truly find balanced relationship is through selfness, you know? So we realize in the end, actually in the beginning, that the true role of the warrior is not to shake the sleeper awake, but rather to keep the fire warm so that they can sleep peacefully. And therefore, rather than losing the dream through the shaking, come to us fully rested with the vision intact. That is the vision that will set us free. And we, my friends, are sleepers. And we are sparks of awakening. And honoring both is the beautiful essence that will connect us to the descent and ascent, which is the magic of the spiritual incarnation known as the astrological ascendant. And so when I say, where would I be now if I had just listened to that crystal-toting hippie and read the Pleiadian book that now resides proudly on my shelf, though I actually have never finished it. In that moment, I realized, wait a second, where would I be if I waited? What if I waited another 10 years so I could really be in the dream state? I would have more vision to bring forth. No, I mean, for all of us in our divine timing, and I'm still so asleep, and I'm still a spark of awakening. And to honor both of these things, you know? To keep the wood a little bit wet so it doesn't all burn right away. Just missed it, you know, with the heart. All right. So Chiron, to me, teaches these many, many things. And Chiron in Pisces, I think, has been and will be, because he will return. And so we're connecting these two worlds through Chiron, who's ingressed Aries, but will regress Pisces and then ingress Aries to stay. First of all, there's been what is just the one wound. What is the wound of spirit itself? And now coming into more of what is the wound in an individual. What is the wound, if I can use these words, and maybe I shouldn't, but like of the Brahman and the Atman, you know, of the greater spirit and then the individualized, unique spirit, which I just prefer actually to call like the spirit and the soul. And that division, that forgetting that we are the all, that we are all one. And so Chiron moving across this place where the zodiac finds its end of the beginning of the beginning of the end of the beginning of the end again, right? It is the ultimate wound. And it is the ultimate wish for the ultimate wisdom. It's the larger relationship. Where are you on your own course, connected to your own soul in its reflection of the one thing? How are you doing this uniquely for the essence of the all? And that's no small business. Yeah. So, all right. Couple more things about Chiron is that we all want to talk about his wounds. We all want to talk about that abandonment. We all want to talk about the poisoned arrow and how he couldn't heal himself. And even his greatest students, like Asclepius, who raised the dead, could not bring peace to his teacher Chiron, who had been wounded by this grossest poison. And in the inability to wound the physical suffering, Chiron, for the first of the immortals, developed this beautiful thing we call empathy and compassion, and chose to take Prometheus's place. And it's a very interesting thing that if we want to honor Uranus as a Promethean being, that Chiron comes into Aries to take Prometheus's place as Prometheus, in this case, played by Uranus, ingresses Taurus. Do you see? For a time they cohabitate. And that time is now, my friends. I'll have to look ahead. Maybe we'll do this at the end to see if there's another time where we have a month in modern time. This could only happen every 84 years minus 7 is about Uranus and Aries. Every about 50 years minus 7, 8 is Chiron and Aries. More than that, actually. Anyway, wheels within wheels. The idea is that I'm trying to get to, when's the next time that we'll actually have Moon come bring the light of Chiron and Aries to Uranus and Aries? And we're about to find that Mercury is playing along in this month now so that we get it. All right. But I keep not saying this. We want to think about the wound. How about the time that Chiron first taught Asclepius to harvest mugwort and St. John's wort and the other warts? How about the first time that Hercules learned to string a bow from this great teacher Chiron? That Theseus learned to parry, that Orpheus learned to play a chord, Like Chiron taught Orpheus that. So let's honor new beginnings, Aries, the Pisces Aries cusp. Let's honor this opportunity to bring the dream into a new spark of awakening that isn't just, how can I get more present with my wounds? And what do the rats from my personal experience chewing through my heat ducts want to say about that? And I should go there. Let's also honor that there is a dream. There is a new heavenly chord. There is a new harmony that is ready to come into the fires of spirit and be a guiding light, or better said, a fuel for my own course, for your own course, for our course. And we go to the charts. Chiron is more than a wound, my friends. And so this is, where are we at here? About 4:40 a.m., Moon in the sign of Pisces. 4:40 a.m. Pacific. Today, May 11th, Friday, Venus's Day, 2018. And Moon ingressed Aries. You can see that time is changing here. It looks like around 6 a.m. Pacific. And then her first aspect in the sign of Aries, the planet here, I'm showing planets in Chiron, and not the asteroids, which is always a thing to consider. But her first aspect is to Chiron, yeah? And so that's what is speaking through me right now, and really wasn't necessarily my intent to go that deep. I want to bring your attention to Mercury, who's now with Uranus in the sign of Aries. Who moves faster? Mercury by a whole lot. Mercury orbits the sun in 88 days and Uranus in 84 years. From Earth's point of view, Mercury through the signs of the zodiac and more time than that, but regardless, Mercury very, very fast and Uranus very, very slow. So you'll see there's the moon Chiron exact. It was about 8 a.m. Pacific. And moon's cruising on, as she do. Okay. So we're going to look at moon's application or applying to Mercury here in a couple days. Moon will spend about 2.5 days in the sign of Aries. And I want to speak about translation of light as well, something you've probably heard me speak about often. It's really a horary and kind of an electional technique, but I love utilizing it in birth charts. And this is something that was first shown to me by Gary Caton, and it's become a principal part of my practice. And, traditionally we'll only work with Ptolemaic aspects. That's the conjunction, which kind of isn't an aspect anyway. It's just cohabitation. It's the two sextiles, the two squares, the two trines, and the opposition. Wait a second. The two sextiles, the two squares, the two trines, and the opposition. Okay. The 7 rays. So no neighboring signs. That's called an aversion. Modern times we call it a semisextile. No quincunxes, the 150 degrees, the neighbors to the opposition. All right. So in the case of Aries, so that's what? Pisces and Taurus, the neighbors, and then the opposite signs for the neighbors, or the signs neighboring the opposite sign of Libra. And those are Virgo and Scorpio. So Aries in the old ways, it's said to not be able to see either Pisces, Taurus, Virgo, or Scorpio. Okay. So planets there, which in this case is who? Jupiter. Okay. And yes, and the sun. And yes, Neptune. But in translation of light, we consider only the Ptolemaic aspects, conjunction, kind of, sextile, square, trines, opposition, and only the visible planets: Moon, Mercury, Venus, Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. And really not Moon, because we're talking about who Moon is applying to, whose light Moon is carrying, and who will she bring it to. And when she finishes the translation of light, hello, Crow, for what I like to consider her day, or her time in one sign, which on average is actually 2.3 Earth days, then she's void of course. So when she makes her last Ptolemaic aspect in the sign of Aries, which looks here like it's going to be Mercury to a visible planet, then she's void of course. We're going to find that it's actually a square to Mars. Okay. So it'd be nice if I could take the outer planets away to speak about this. And you know what? I'm going to do that. The chart's going to freak out for a second. Actually, let me stop this and I'll prepare that off the screen. Are you having fun? You learning something? Or just hearing me rant, and is that at least entertaining? When we're dealing with our own soul wounds and whatnot, I always like to say, let's at least put on a good show. And I tend to do so. All right, so Chiron's going to come out of here, and we're going to do another thing. I'm going to even take out the notes, called translation of light. If you feel like you're learning something here and you feel like giving something back for what you're receiving, I just quit my day job and could sure use a little boost from the economic standpoint. You'll find a donation button at morethan.astrology.com, my webpage, where you'll also find a services link to book private consultation. We can talk about where your moon, whose light your moon was translating, and where she was going with it. But hopefully through what I'm sharing here, you'll be able to do that for your own chart. You'll find also opportunities for private counsel, coaching, and mentorship, if that's interesting to you. Another way you can help me out is simply like this video and share it around. And that helps a ton. Helps me spread my word. I do this for fun, and I do this as my devotion to the mysteries, first and foremost, very literally. And it's nice also that I'm making an okay living having quit the day job. The house is going to have to get rented out. Got to free myself up a little bit and once again reorganize the kind of conditioned definitions of success and abundance. Yeah, but it's a very important thing to do. And actually, I think it's very alive in the Celestial Symphony right now, so it's okay to be sharing that. You know, when we choose to follow our sacred path, that's one of the first requirements. What is success? What is abundance? Realign that, redefine that, like within, release yourself from the cultural conditioning, you know, the program of the parentage. And then make room in following your true spark, your true course, your true soul's expression and reflection of the one spirit. Make room for abundance and success to show up in ways that you could never imagine they would, because you didn't know what they were when you were trying to achieve them before. Because what we see again and again and again is people achieve success and they achieve abundance, and they're in no way successful and they're in no way in a state of abundance because they achieved something that they were told was success. They were told was abundance, right? And one of the great opportunities for an extreme shattering and calcination and loss of everything we identified with, to bring ourselves into disillusion and separation to find the lesser stone, and we can continue alchemically. And who's maybe the greatest teacher of the alchemical mysteries? Perhaps Chiron, perhaps Saturn, the moon, Mars, Venus, the sun, Jupiter, Mercury, right? I mean, los planetas, they reflect to us these beauties of the mysteries. And so I'm here mostly to do that. So a great way that you could help me out is to give a like, put a comment here. What do you like about this? Is it too long once again? Is it whatever? You know, so help a brother out. Anyway, I like deep, seriously, like legitimate, deep bow of sincere gratitude for those of you who support me in my own study, seeking and sharing of that which I am finding. And I say this not often enough, but that which I have found is super cool, and it might be true. And I reserve the right to change my mind and heart tonight. Yeah. And I'm not here to teach my astrology. I'm here to further remind you to remember yours, just as you are here to do the same for me. And I thank you for that. And I thank folks so much for the support that they're able to give, whether economically or simply through a thumbs up. You know, it's a big deal. It helps. And it's not just ego. We're fucking with algorithms here, my friends. Okay. So let's go back to the chart. And this is 3:54 a.m. This is a way that I can trick this brilliant software called Intrepid into getting a natural chart wheel. And you'll see that I took everything invisible away. Oops, hold on a second. Dope. Didn't do the right tricks. Something like that, and we got to push this button here. Okay. So the question is, which planet will Moon first make a Ptolemaic aspect to? And then which? And then which? And then which? And I'm just going to let the Moon move very slowly so you can play with this. And, you know, again, in this way, which we speak about the void of course Moon often, we don't often enough speak about the translation of light, which is really the technique at its roots. We want to talk about the void and the darkness, and, you know, we don't talk about the light. What's going on with us, astrologers? Bring a little light to the situation. All right, so let me slow Moon down. And understand once again that if we're talking about Ptolemaic aspects to the visible lights, that Aries does not see the neighbors, Taurus and Pisces, and Aries does not see the neighbors to the opposition being Libra. So the neighbors are Virgo and Scorpio. Yeah? So the bowl is out. Sorry, sun. The fish is out. No visible planet is there anyway. The priestess is out. Sorry, nobody's in Virgo right now, who is anyway is a visible planeta. And sorry, Scorpio, Jupiter, okay? Because Aries, traditionally speaking, does not see those four. Now, everything's an aspect. There are quintiles, septiles, noviles, decapentiles, whatever. It's all for real. Every planet is in relationship to every other planet, but there is sense to studying the old ways too, because you get to learn what the zodiac actually is. All right. So, or you can hear what the zodiac actually is and hear why neighboring signs like Aries and Taurus are said to be in aversion. Right. So Jupiter and Taurus will not be seen by an Aries moon. She, from Aries, because the sign of Aries casts rays to sextile, Gemini and Aquarius, trine, Leo and Sagittarius, opposition, Libra. Notice those are all the same polarity, air and fire, blades. And the only ones of the opposite polarity, earth and water, are the squares in the case of Aries, the cardinal signs Cancer and Capricorn. Okay, so from Aries, conjunctions work. And then the sextiles of Aquarius and Gemini, the squares of Capricorn and Cancer, the trines of Sagittarius and Leo, and the opposition of Libra. Okay. And that takes Sun and Jupiter out of this mix. I'm not going to take them away. I'm going to ask you to do that with your face. And then just look at the degrees of the planets. So you will see that first Moon will square Saturn. And then Moon will bring that square Saturn light, which might be kind of heavy light to carry, you see. It's a Dexter square. I'm not going to tell you why. A right-handed square, an opening square. Leave that there. Many of you know that language. Old language, beautiful study. Even though the other side of it is called sinister for left-handed, and why left-handed would be considered sinister is in itself a wonderful study. It is an encouragement for us to ditch these old patriarchal words, perhaps, but we can also dig deeper into the source and see just that simply sinister meant left-handed and not evil and all that initially. All right, so first Moon will square Saturn. Then what? What's the next Ptolemaic aspect she's going to make? I mean, the next planet in lowest degrees after Saturn, who's in the 9th degree of Capricorn, is Jupiter in the 18 Scorpio, and will be less by the time Moon gets there. But again, Moon does not see Jupiter. Ptolemaically speaking, the quincunx is an inversion. It's not an aspect. 150 degrees, okay? So Venus is the next being. Moon will carry square light of Saturn to a sextile to Venus, or at least it appears to be that way in this frame of the film, but we're going to have to let time breathe to check out the scene. What is it to carry a Saturn square to a Gemini Venus? Well, let me bring this back into my own cosmology, my own home. I mean, Saturn and Capricorn, he was asking me probably to look into like the rules and the way that I do my home and roots, you know, just in that Capricornian way, the way that I allow myself to be an elder and, you know, and keep the cave like safe for the winter time and those kinds of things. Sorry for Southern Hemispherians where the Capricorn essence is actually the summer. Let me just say who's holding it down in the dark of the night when I can't have heat because rats have chewed through the ducts. Well, I haven't done my job of like holding space and keeping the temple and the cave clean, you see. So the Moon square Saturn for me is super alive right now. And the Moon's going to hold that tension for a while. I mean, she'll move more than a day. Know that Moon moves on average 13 degrees per day. And for this reason, some suggest that Moon will actually drop Saturn's light before she finds her way to Venus. So here's the Moon-Saturn square. It looks like it's around 8 p.m. on Friday this evening, Pacific time. And then it's going to take Moon a good amount of time to find her way to Venus. Now, before I get there, I want to say this. it looks at this time that moon is going to conjoin Mercury before moon squares Saturn, or sorry, Mars. Remember, Sun and Jupiter are out of the contemplation because we're talking about Ptolemaic aspects and the aversions, the semi-sextiles, and quincunxes are aversions. So no Taurus, no Scorpio for the sign of Aries. So the candidates here are Saturn, Venus, Mercury, and Mars. And in the degrees as they are right here, and especially, now, it looks like it will go a square from Aries moon to Capricorn Saturn, a sextile from Aries moon to Gemini Venus, a conjunction of Aries moon and Aries Mercury, and then a square of Aries moon with Capricorn Mars. And then she's void until she ingresses Taurus and starts her own journey then. In Taurus, she won't see Aries or Gemini, so she won't see Venus. In Taurus, she will see every other being. But wait, Mercury's in Aries and Taurus doesn't see Aries. Well, Mercury won't be at that point. In fact, as we cruise through time, one thing you're going to see here is before Mercury or moon is even able to bring the square light of Saturn to Venus by sextile, which is happening here. You see, here's moon now applying to Venus. And I'll say that this applying sextile of the Aries moon to Gemini Venus will testify because moon, who is the faster moving agent, it is moon sextile Venus, not Venus sextile moon. It's very important. It's moon who's casting the ray, who's making this happen. And by the way, this is a left-handed aspect or a so-called sinister aspect or a closing aspect of the moon-Venus cycle, and we don't need to go there right now, but for those of you who speak that language, know that, tune into that. It's a different thing than the sextile on the other side, which in the case of a Gemini Venus would require a Leo moon, and we'll see that in a week. So at this time, moon is applying to the Venus sextile. Moon is still, some would say no, some would say because she's moved 13 degrees since the Saturn conjunct or square, that she's dropping that light. Yeah, add 13 to 8 and add 13 to 9th where Saturn is, and you find 22, and Venus is past that degree. So some will say that moon actually drops that light of Saturn before she gets to Venus here. What does that mean? She's like pure moon once again, as she is when she first comes into a sign, and maybe when she's void also. But I'd rather think of her still carrying this square to Saturn. And so now she applies to Venus and Gemini, who might say, hey, Brett, part of your thing, if you really want to get to this idea of how have you been a bad master of the house and allow the rats to destroy your spark, well, maybe you have to look at the Gemini principles of duality and division and polarity, but maybe you need to do this with the trickster laugh and smile. And Venus, maybe you need to do this with some love, and you'll find the magic there. Yeah. So here is moon applying to Venus, and then we'll find that moon perfects right here, the sextile to Venus. This looks like it's Saturday, about 10 p.m. Pacific time. And now moon is applying where? Do you notice that Mercury has, since moon's been ingressed Aries, like right now, Mercury has perfected the Aries Capricorn square to Mars, right? So now Mars is in an earlier degree of the zodiac. So if we only look at the frame of the film and don't honor that this is part of a scene and allow time to breathe, we can really misplace this technique, okay? Because it looked earlier that moon was going to square Saturn, sextile Venus, conjoin Mercury, and then square Mars, and now we see a very different scene. Square Saturn, sextile Venus, square Mars, and then conjoin Mercury, okay? And so, and yet, here is the square to Mars about to perfect. But what happened? Notice what happened with Mercury. Mercury's left the sign. So Mars would intercept this anyway. But even with Moon applying to conjoin Mercury in Aries, that aspect did not testify because one of the planets broke it up, in this case, Mercury, by leaving the sign and ingressing Taurus, okay? So the translation of light for Aries Moon in this period is a square to Saturn, a sextile to Venus, and a square to Mars, and that's it. And then she's void, of course. Now, maybe this Aries Moon square Saturn cold and dry says, you know, you are cold because you have no heat, because you were a bad lord of your domicile, and you know, Saturn's also, by the way, like final dispositor at this time. And so, and you drop the ball and you let the rats chew through the heat ducts, child. And then Moon gets to the sextile to Venus and she says, honey, it's okay. You're going to survive. Think about how this is dividing you and why, so you can bring yourself back together. And let me remind you that the medicine is laughter and play. That's what will give you a new perspective to help you bring new heat to the situation. And then Moon squares Mars very near the degree of his exaltation from his sign of Aries, you know. And sure, that might be a challenging square, the opening or the Dexter square, as it said, but it's empowered. You know, Moon is looking from Aries, according to the old rules of this very kind of dignified Capricorn. Mars not only exalted, but near his degree of exaltation. And look, Mars's last days in the Capricorn mysteries, right? He's going to ingress Aquarius the same day Uranus ingresses Taurus, which is May 15th. Though he will also return to Capricorn. That's a tale for another time. So this is an action square, this Mercury-Mars square, which will be the last activation of Moon from the sign of Aries before then she goes void, of course. And maybe at that time, which is Sunday, May 13th, sometime Pacific around, looks like 9 a.m., will be Monday the 14th for many of you in other places in the world. Maybe I'll get the understanding of what I can do. I mean, maybe I need to go full warrior mode on these rats, which kind of makes me sad. One thing I know I have to do is replace this duct. It's totally chewed out, you know. But there's something more, because again, this is about my ducks in me, my rats, whatever those are, in me. You know, my own like divisions and my own lack of heat and you know, it might simply be teaching me to exercise very literally. And that's always a great contemplation, especially Aries contemplation, if we can get into that place of like fast running and think about what are we running towards and what are we running away from. Okay, so here's Moon's ingress Taurus. Show that to you. Bam. And now what's her translation of light going to be in the sign of Taurus? I just like to think of when she ingresses to a new sign, she's just totally clean. She's pure Moon after the void, which is like Moon going to bed in her night. You know, again, it's 2.3 days on average Moon through a sign, but I just think of it like her ingressing a sign like the Moon's morning in a new country, and then her going to sleep at night when she's void. So her first conversation here is going to be with Mercury, yeah, in Taurus. And it's new for Mercury. So it's cool for Moon to come in and say that. We're going to look at one more thing before we end here, which is the way that Moon, Mercury, and Uranus are doing some cool things right now in the course of the next couple of days this weekend. And then what? She's going to trine Saturn. So from Aries, she squared Saturn, modality. And from Taurus, she trines Saturn, element. Then what? She's going to oppose Jupiter after the trine to Saturn. And then she's going to conjoin the sun for the next new moon at Algol. We start the next cycle. And she's not going to see Venus because aversion. And the question here is, will she or will she not can perfect, after she perfects this conjunction with the sun, she's now carrying a conjoined sun light to Saturn. You see that? The next aspect she's going to make is trine to Saturn. But will it perfect? Will Moon get to 29 degrees in a bunch before Saturn leaves the sign of Capricorn for Aquarius ingress on May 15th? And the answer is yes. So it's by the skin of her teeth. It's coming on here. I don't want to go too fast or we'll miss it. We will see that Moon does just barely perfect this trine with Capricorn Mars from the sign of Taurus around here. I'm going to let it go really slowly. Look at that. 29 degrees, 52 minutes before she goes void of course. So having Mars in these late degrees of Capricorn allows, in our time right now, both from Aries, where Moon's last Ptolemaic aspect from that sign is the square to Capricorn Mars, and from Taurus, where her last Ptolemaic aspect from that sign is this trine to Capricorn Mars before her next ingress. It gives us periods of very short void of course. Well, what is the void? I mean, I think it's a time to cleanse all the kind of the connections Moon has made through one sign, and we're going to release that and bring ourselves back to just pure Moon essence before we awaken into the next day or ingress into the next sign, and prepare ourselves as pure Moon to then start engaging with carrying this conversation to the next one and the energy of that one to the next one until we're void again and we get to purge and purify and come back to pure Moon self and then wake up. Gurdjieff spoke about feeding the Moon. And I'm looking forward. I'm hanging out with a friend who's been practicing in the Gurdjieffian mystery schools for some time this weekend. I really look forward to speaking with him about that, because I've been contemplating that just as a statement more than anything else lately. All right. You know what's going to happen in Gemini. So she doesn't see Taurus. She doesn't see Capricorn. She, you know, Mars ingresses Aquarius after Moon ingress Gemini. She doesn't see Scorpio. Moon's only conjunction or Ptolemaic aspect in the sign of Gemini is this conjunction to Venus. And so it's going to be, again, a very short void of course, because the aspect there is so late. But Moon is pure Moon for her entire trip through the Gemini mysteries, you know, until she meets Venus. It's an amazing thing. I really encourage you to do this every time Moon ingresses a new sign. Look at the different aspects she will make. I would say first, go traditional. Go with Ptolemaic aspects and visible planets, and then maybe bring in some of the other beings and think about that, okay? I mean, you could even bring in the asteroids and, you know. Okay, so let's talk right now. Here's Moon and Chiron. I am going to set this up once again as a zero Aries chart wheel and make it a little bit more of a global phenomenon than conditioned to local Seattle space. And that means I've got to play it through time to show a few of these things. I want to speak about this. Just moved by some hours because I want to get the Moon to advance. I want to speak about these sides of mind where Moon represents that dream, unconscious, subconscious. I prefer super conscious. Art curve side, where Mercury often represents more of our lines, the logical, the systems, yeah. We can think about Jupiter and Mercury, and these are yards as well. Jupiter traditionally associated with Sagittarius, seeking, and Pisces, faith. Mercury associated traditionally with Gemini, exploration intellectually, and Virgo, practice of the way, you know, and systems once again. So I'll slow this down. We'll look here. I mean, it's really interesting that Mercury will come conjoin Uranus And then Moon will conjoin Uranus. You get this kind of triple conjunction where they appear to be together in the sky, though we don't see this being between Moon and Mercury, these visible ones. Mercury very visible from the southern hemisphere still at this time, not at all from the northern hemisphere, and that's a trip for another time. But it actually gets back to the thing I was talking about much earlier, which is signs of short and long ascension. Leave that there. But very interesting, as we saw before, Mercury will ingress Taurus before Moon conjoins Mercury. And it's actually not Moon's last Aries aspect in, this go, but her first Taurus aspect in the sign of her exaltation. And so I want to just think about this, like, think about the motions. Think about right now how, if we're looking at these beings, do it like that. Yes, great. This is Mother's Day, Pacific anyway, Sunday, May 13th, 4:21 a.m. Mother's Day brings the flowers of Taurus and or the flowers of Scorpio for our southern hemispheric beings, very strong right now for a midnight star. Jupiter is lighting up that side of southern hemisphere spring. But this triple conjunction is very fascinating. Now, is it a conjunction? Because again, Moon will not perfect the aspect with Mercury before Mercury leaves the sign for Taurus, and that's where the perfection goes down. I mean, it's interesting where this is in relationship to the so-called ruler of this sign and the non-relationship to the one who's exalted there, if you want to play with old rules. But this is a fascinating thing. This triple alignment to the Capricorn Mars by square from Aries, a place where Mars does his thing so brightly, it's really, I think, informing Mars about to hold the truth of the Capricorn school, or to bring new through, these ways of conflict and action is what Roger called the opening square. Now, this is an opening square for Mercury square Mars and Moon square Mars, but this is the closing square for Mars square Uranus. Or Moon and Mercury, Dexter square Mars, and Mars sinister square Uranus. And that in and of itself is a very important thing that you do not see in this frame, or you can see in this frame once you've allowed and learned how to let time breathe and honor the scene. And I'm telling you, astrology is static and a little bit cold and, frozen if we don't learn how to see how the wheels roll. So clearly that's what I'm trying to show. All right. So Moon, Mercury, Uranus. Notice I say them in the order of their planetary speed. And if I just call this Moon, Uranus, Mercury by zodiacal degree, I don't get the point that Mercury is actually going to leave the sign before Moon perfects that conjunction, and that Moon-Mercury conjunction does not testify. It's a brilliant contemplation. So let me come some hours back there. Mercury applying to conjoin Uranus. Moon applying to Mercury, and Uranus then says no. Uranus comes between to block that, and then Mercury leaves the sign. But so Moon is this kind of dreamer, subconscious or superconscious side, and Mercury is more of a what's here in my atmosphere logician. Now, all this speaks in a way to the Aries mysteries of that spark of the flame, what drives us, what is our thing, what are we here to do, what inspires us, what mountain is worth climbing for you. And Saturn inspiring that through some action for Mercury and Moon, is the Rudyard speak, conflict and action, and for Uranus, because it's the closings where conflict and spirit. I'll leave that there. How are Capricorn and Aries team, squaring off? What is the one that really speaks, and maybe this being even more so about the rules and the traditions of the tribe, and then these beings who are about individuating and honoring your essence of individuality and independence. selfness, you see. And this is the last moon Uranus conjunction in the sign of Aries. So the first moon Chiron conjunction in the sign of Aries, because Chiron just ingressed on April 17th. And the last moon Uranus conjunction in the sign of Aries. What? Because Uranus will ingress Taurus on May 15th. Now, again, he'll be back in Aries for 3 months between November 6th and March 6th, and at least 2 of those, I'm sure, will feature a moon conjunction. Chiron will return to Pisces, and some of that time will feature moon conjunctions with Chiron and Pisces as well. But we're entering a new era, and the moon is the trigger. Actually, that's a stupid word. I'm really trying to release things like trigger and hit. The moon is the reflection. The moon is the boat that can float us out, and especially in this case, to the invisible beings that we can't see. The moon is the magnifying glass that says, look here. The moon is the spotlight. And so when you're in transits and the moon comes by and activates, embraces the transiting planet, the natal planet, whatever, you know, these things, like that long-term transit is like activated. So moon is really speaking of this new era of Aries Chiron and this ending of an era of Aries Uranus. Neither one of those is fully formal yet, but it's a very significant time. And Uranus in so many ways is higher mind, electric, revolutionary, breaking out of the box, you know? So again, I kind of spoke about this a bit in the CIA, the Cosmic Intelligence Agency, Uranus Taurus webinar yesterday, much more so in a EA Zoom meeting where I had a couple hours to play a couple weeks ago. You can find those online. I'll put those links in the descriptions above. There is one other thing I was going to link as well. Oh, right. The live star study, like being out under the big screen together in the desert. All right. So I'll link that to the I-Astrologer OPA retreat that I'll be working in October. I'm really looking forward to that. I hope to see a lot of you guys in Chicago. If we haven't met on Earth yet, and especially if we have, and especially if we haven't, please make sure if you see me in the halls to interrupt me and say hello. Love to make these, you know, virtual space-based connections grounded in reality. I love to say hello and see who you are and all that. You know, there's gonna be a lot of us in Chicago very soon. All right, so, you know, the last thing I want to say about this, and I'll let time play so we can see this as a thing. Mercury applied to Uranus. Moon applies to Uranus. That all goes down in the Aries place. But then Mercury ingresses Taurus, and the moon, Mercury happening is in that sign. It's also, I think, preparing the space, the Taurus space, for Uranus's ingress, and also for the truth that as soon as Uranus ingresses Taurus, Mars is going to ingress Aquarius to activate a fixed square. It looks like a cardinal square is happening, and it is, but this one, like Mars and Uranus, doesn't perfect because Uranus will ingress Taurus before it does, and then just after, 14 hours after Mars, into Aquarius, and shortly after that, activating the perfect square in fixed signs. Very interestingly, you know, instead of Aries Capricorn, where Mars might want that thing to get done, it happens in Taurus Aquarius, which might be more favored by Uranus. Wheels within wheels within wheels, so many ways to play. And, you know, more than I meant to share today. But the rats in my heat ducts have the heat all crazy and the spark misaligned so we can have more of the dream shine and speak through. and release us a bit from the linear mind. I would really encourage you to make space over the course of the next couple of days. And this means even though Moon is in the sign of Aries, which really can do that, this is a fun term for me right now, fast, sparky, fiery pace of the rat race. It's about understanding that where Moon Mercury will meet are Taurus, the grace of Earth's pace, and slowing down. So to anticipate this and to anticipate many shifts that are going down like this week, it's a really important time to have some ceremony, get grounded, be in nature, think about, as Hermes said, separate thou the fire and earth sweetly and with great ingenuity. Think about what that means. Read the Emerald Tablets. That'd be a good thing to do this week. And be in places where you can study earth and fire. You know, think about the volcano that's erupting right now on Hawaii, Big Island. And look at how fire becomes earth. And, you know, think about what that means as an incarnation, as a soul. And so if you can allow, I think, first, this mind that looks around here, Mercury, and does the things, to combine with that, what we often say is the higher octave, Uranus, out into like a more global thing. And then Moon bringing some dream to that higher thing, but then Moon super conscious and Mercury conscious merge in the body mind of Taurus. It's very important. I would say that is the thing, and especially look at the squares to Saturn and Mars and Capricorn, the trines to Saturn and Mars and Capricorn from Moon and Aries and then Taurus respectively. We're talking more and more and more, and Uranus Taurus as well, about bringing these mysteries out of the spirit, so cosmos alone, and into visible, audible, you know, things that we can touch and hold and honor our astrology through the most important planet first, the one that you chose, or perhaps she chose us. I don't know how it works, but of course I'm speaking about Earth. And that being said, thank you for drinking Astrolo tea with me. I'll see you in space, and hopefully on Earth. And come play in October. Sacred Astronomy for Astrologers, 3-day retreat. You will learn a ton. I'll tell you right now, I haven't told people this yet, but you will receive a bunch of video training even before you show up. And we're going to have an amazing time together. And by the way, there's an early bird special running until June. So get down with that, my friends. I'll put a link above along with links for the 2 YouTube things I described. Oh, and the article about the elemental shifts in the Prophecy of Prometheus I described during the course of this flow as well. Thanks for being here. Thank you for your support. Love and planets. See you out in the realms, my friends.